Matt, just what have you seen in practice so far?
In terms of your lineups and things like that, how you want to play?
Yeah, we've really stayed with like Braden, Fletch, and Trey together, and then just mixed in 2 to 3 guys with those guys just to kind of see different matchups, how they play well together. Obviously, Braden helps everybody, so everybody goes with Braden, that helps, just especially from a skill standpoint, because he's going to generate more quality looks for people from an offensive standpoint. But we're also just looking defensively, like how that pieces. If Trey Kaufman has to play as a 5, does he play as a 4? Is Fletch playing as a 2, or is Fletch playing with a 3? Obviously, when he's with Cam and Miles, when they're playing the 3, Fletch moves to the 2. When Jakari or CJ is with them, Fletch moves to a 3. So just trying to organically watch and see and kind of what we feel is best. Everybody's had their moments and their days, but nobody has really separated themselves at this point, which I kind of look as a positive. Even though it makes your job harder, it's still a positive because it's been very competitive.
When Trey's at 5, is Cam your 4?
Yes.
Is that an adjustment for him?
Yeah, I think it's an adjustment when you haven't played it. And we haven't done that a lot, but we've done it enough to where, it puts Cam on a bigger 4, in practice. And I think that's the toughest piece, is to be able to knock the post out or be able to box out from that position. But offensively, it definitely gives an advantage because Cam can space the floor with Braden, and then it allows Trey to really use his quickness and his scoring ability against a bigger 5. Yes.
So look, everybody talks about Zach Leaving, right? But where do you see that production of Lance Jones going?
Yeah, that's a big one there, just because how things worked for us. The year before, Fletcher played the 2 and he was our second ball handler, and then when Lance came, that moved Fletch over to the 3, and then Lance really helped us in a lot of other ways, like breaking presses, guarding different people, kind of the fill-in spots of basketball that are so important. Lance really helped us. Even if he air missiled a couple, he still would step up and want to take that big shot. He had that confidence, and probably made the biggest shot of the season for us against Tennessee, making that 3. But now he was a huge addition. I think CJ Cox and Jakari Harris are both 2 freshman guards that can guard, but they also can handle the ball and they can make 3s. So it gives kind of the prototypical replacement for him, but yet we also have Cam Heide and Miles Colvin there that are those traditional wings. And how do we blend all of them, right? Is kind of the question. And I always, people always want the answer from the coach. When I always say it should come from competition and production and practice. But I think just talking about those guys, and we have we got really 3 7-footers on our roster. Will Berg had to wait his turn. Daniel Jacobson and Raleigh Burgess, 6'11", and 7'3", are both 2 young bigs that are really good players. So we have a lot of different ways to go, but we're trying to figure out what's kind of the best way, or do we play a couple different ways throughout a game or throughout a season.
Matt, you guys have won a perimeter game. You've won with the post stuff.
Right.
Stylistically, how do you see this team shaping up?
Yeah, I would say a blend of both. Trey Kaufman allows us to run stuff, and whether he's at the 4 or the 5, we'll use him more to get the ball in that mid post and low post and be able to play out of it and use that matchup. We'll play obviously a lot of ball screen action through Braden Smith like we've done in the past. So his ability to manipulate the defense through his passing is going to be a big asset for us. And then just trying to kind of peel off from there and run some different stuff to get some of our shooters some action from that. But I think it's going to be a blend, even though I think Braden will have the most volume.
You talked a couple of times about how you think that Trey is going to take a big step forward this year. Obviously, he's going to have more opportunities because Zach isn't there. But have you seen anything from him this offseason that gives you a lot of confidence he's able to handle those increased opportunities?
Yeah, he's just continued to work, no different. His body's better. Just kind of little things where you just know like someone's primed to do it. Like you get off in May, and we start summer school normally that second week of June, and he gets an Airbnb 2 hours away and does 2-a-days with his workout guy. So just that's such a big piece in terms of like your confidence is the work that you put in. A lot of times players want a coach to give them that when wholeheartedly you give it to yourself, because like when adversity hits or downtimes hit, how do you push through? And he's been able to push through. I think his major adversity times are over, and a lot of his adversity had to do with Zach. Like Zach just knocked everybody out of the equation because I didn't like taking him out of the game.
What did you see Cam try to do this offseason also to kind of prepare
Yeah.
for that you're talking about?
Yeah, Cam's done some good work, man. He's very athletic, very fast, kind of that 3-and-D. Can make threes, can run the court, can attack the offensive glass. Became a really good defender. So I think just playing to his strengths. A lot of times people always look at their improvement as what their add-ons are instead of understanding like who you are and just get better at what you do. Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, the Final Four had been an obstacle, getting there had been an obstacle. It was been for a while. When you look back, I mean, does that change? Having done it now, does it change how you feel, how you approach this year?
Yeah.
It's no longer something that you have to make.
Right. Yeah, it keeps you away from that article that everybody writes, right, about who hasn't gotten there. From a team standpoint, you hope it builds confidence, and you still have to be humble in what you do, but you have to have an edge to you. And so I think part of our edge was losing that 116 game and then not running from that. But now, winning softens you. And so can we keep that edge and then try to keep in front of us to try to win 3 Big Ten championships in a row? Like that's what first and foremost we'll try to do, because it comes before the NCAA tournament. And if you can do that or compete and be in that position, then you're going to put yourself in a good spot. Like we've had a top 4 or 5 seed here for 7-8 years. I don't know the actual stat, but we've been pretty successful and put ourselves in good spots. But that didn't always mean that we had success in the NCAA tournament. Sometimes we get the second weekend, sometimes we wouldn't. And so our ability to get to a Final Four, you're hoping it makes you even more hungry to be able to get back there. But you also got to put yourself in the best position possible.
How about you personally, guys? Were there at least a few moments where you're able to sit back and say, yeah, we did it?
Yeah, you're more like there's no doubt it's a relief. There's no question personally. Anybody that would say that would be lying. There's no doubt about it, because you don't always have a team that can do it, right? But when you do have a team that you feel that can do it, and 3 or 4 times in your mind you didn't do it, you have to look in the mirror first, because the players change. I didn't change. So I'm the common denominator. So you got to be able to do everything in your power to help them get that way. And I think if you take that ownership as a coach, now you're going to have players want to take that ownership themselves. And now once they see that you're out there, taking it, now when it comes, you spread it out, right? That's what you're supposed to do. But no, more or less just happy for our guys, but also you're, I don't know if the word's sad, you're just disappointed you couldn't help those former players that weren't able to, experience that, because it's obviously a great feeling to get to that point.
Matt, this is very easy for me to say. Of course, you'd always rather have a Zach Edey than not, but
Right.
On some level, it must appeal to you to have a normal, so to speak, team again, to get back to, coaching the way you were a little bit more accustomed to coaching.
Right.
And speaking of things nobody's going to say or write anymore, you can't say, well, of course you just throw it in 80. He's got
Right.
80. So having a chance to kind of move on into an era when you don't have that, is that appealing?
Right. For us, it's always just trying to orchestrate the strengths of our team and what we have. So Zach Edey didn't come to our team the way he was at the end. I had to make those guys throwing the basketball. And some days he caught it and some days he didn't. But we had to grow with him because I felt like he had a unique talent But I feel that way about anybody else. Like Travion Williams was a guy right away. I was like, if he just gets in shape, he'll just take off. And now I got a lot of young guys that I feel really good about. And I think they're all going to be really good. I just don't know when they're going to be good. So now you're trying to piece that with returners that, have had a lot of success. But I think we'll have more balance. Obviously, he had a high volume, and Braden had a high volume of usage. And I think that's what's tough for other players. Like, there's always like a lot of, like in recruiting, like one of the dumbest things a coach can do is tell somebody like how they're going to be used. And like we've all done it through the years. And like, well, coach, how are you going to use me? I'm like, well, if you become one of our top 2 or 3 scorers, here's how we're going to use you. Well, what if I don't become one of your top 2 or 3 scorers? Like, well, you're going to have to blend in with the guys that are our top 2 or 3 scorers. Because you sit there in recruiting like you're one of those guys, right? But you're really one of 13 when you get there. And last time I checked, you're 19, and there's people in the room 22, 23 years old. So I think that for us kind of starts their development. When they choose us, they know that we didn't operate under any false pretenses to get them. So we have that trust. So now once they don't get what they want, because 70 to 80% of them aren't going to get what they want, you just can't. So anytime you deal with a high school kid and you just say, like, who's your 7th man on your high school team? And they'll say, Billy Jones. Well, how many plays do you run for Billy? We don't. Well, what if you're our 7th man next year? Are you going to be mad we don't run any plays for us? Because I don't run any plays for our 7th man either. I run stuff for our Zach Eady. I run stuff for Braden Smith. Every blue moon, Fletch gets a crumb, and we'll set a couple pin downs for him, get him a triple. Trey Kaufman will get a couple post-ups. That's it. Zach Eady and Braden get the rest. So now Braden comes in here. The thing about a great point guard and a great center that'll pass is you run stuff for them and it creates for others. That's what's cool about the game of basketball. Zach Eady was so unselfish. Braden is so unselfish. So when your best 2 guys are unselfish and they're passing, now we have great chemistry just off of that by itself. So now trying to get your next guys not to be the next Zach Eady, just kind of be the best version of themselves, that piece of it there is really important, because you want them to do offensively what's their strength. Sometimes that doesn't always connect because what they think is a strength isn't. And now you get enough data, and then you get enough data, you show them, hey, this is what you've done. I always like talking to somebody about their high school stats. But then they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, well, I had nothing to do with those stats. Like, you can't blame the college coach for your high school stats. Like, that's what you did. You were a bad 3-point shooter in high school. Why all of a sudden should we just be shooting and hoisting threes? All because you worked on it all summer. Because you've never made 2 threes in a game when there's 15,000 people in here. Because it changes, right? Like, everything changes. So to have hard conversations to try to lift your guys up and develop and grow, but also have a plateau at some times because your season's starting and you got to do what's best for Purdue. Sometimes it's really hard for individuals to kind of understand that. But then once they get there and they get it, and you're like, hey, everybody's going to sacrifice for us to win. And we got to have that sacrifice, and we got to have that buy-in. But I don't have the answer, all right? But your play is going to show me what the answer is. So when you can get that separation, and then you can start to get in to that role definition. And that's what makes the game beautiful, or it kills the game. If you get guys that all want to play shortstop and lead off, you're done. I don't care what your talent is. So that's what a lot of these guys in this room are doing. Like, when you take a new job, you got to sign 8, 9, 10 guys now. And that's hard. You have a high talent level, but you don't have a high cohesion. You can say all the right things, but they've never worked well together. They just haven't. So now they got to grow into working well together, where hopefully we have a lot of guys that return. I got 5 guys that played in the championship game, right? I got 2 other guys that were in our program. So maybe I don't know if my numbers are totally right, but you kind of get that. We have to grow with that, and hopefully have all that, that collective intellect to be better as a program.
You talk about that with your honesty in recruiting, but I'm wondering is there a similar conversation you have when you have a guy like Caleb First in your program who's a contributor for a couple of years and then has to take a step back? Like, is that a similar conversation or more difficult for you?
Well, I think for him, more or less, like, that's Zach Eady. Like Trey Kaufman-Renn didn't play as much the year before. Zach Eady, he didn't play as much last year. That's Zach Eady. Like, it's just like, I just didn't think it made sense to take him out of the game. You guys do understand that, right? You guys, we can agree on one thing, but no, like, and then, you know, he's pre-med, and so he's, you know, going to get into medical school. And see, that's where I think you have to be able to, in recruiting, if education is not a part of it, it's all basketball. So that's a lot of people leaving right there. So if you can have a balance to where, like, man, I know it hasn't worked for me, but here's my issue. Zach Edey was my issue. You know, not that I'm not a good enough player, because he is a good enough player. And now we had to do, you know, it really got me to a hard line, because the year before I was making mistakes and we just weren't skilled enough around Zach Edey. And so now the next year, a couple guys didn't play as much and a couple guys played more because they could shoot the basketball. So now when you want to double him, we got all shooters. When you don't want to double him, he's one-on-one. And so that balance is what we had to go for. You know.
Matt, you had a lot of success with Lance Jones last year.
Yes.
We've got no portal guys this year. We rarely go to the portal.
Right.
Is that a philosophical decision? And do you see a day when you might be back?
I think I'll go into the portal when I have to. I don't think it'll be my decision. I don't think we can continue. We've taken 2 guys out of the portal in 4 years. I do not think we can continue at that clip. I just think from a numbers standpoint, 13 scholarship guys, trying to keep 13 guys happy is really hard. A little bit of us is we redshirt. So about half of our guys, especially if there's a couple guys on our team now that redshirts, I think we'll have 6 or 7 now on our roster this year that have. So that piece of it for us allows us to soften the blow sometimes, because guys normally aren't going to redshirt and then leave. They're going to be like, okay, I sat out, I worked on my game. This is going to give me a better chance to play, you know, the next year. Then if they don't play after that year, you're probably in a predicament at that point with individuals. So I think that piece of it, it's impossible for somebody not to live in the portal that gets a new job. But when you do that and you take 7, 8, 9, 10 people, like your ratio of success with those transfers are what, 50% is probably good. So now, okay, 3 or 4 of those guys are now gone for sure. Now what if someone goes pro and someone else didn't play? Okay, you're right back in there needing 6, 7 guys. So now you go back to it. And then you go back to it again. Well, now that becomes kind of who you are. And you really didn't want it to be that way. But now that's the way it is because you've taken a job. But when you've been somewhere 20 years, you can do it. Like the people that are staying with it more and not getting into it are the people that have been in this league the longest. But you're still having moments where you got to take a Lance Jones or a David Jenkins with it. But I think everybody would rather do it the way we're doing it. But I don't think everybody is in that position because there's so much change in college basketball.
Last year was the highest scoring season in college basketball. We know the sport's cyclical.
Right.
What type of tweaks do you think are coming on the defensive side to kind of combat some of these offenses
Yeah.
that are going nuts?
You know, I think more than anything, it's they're trying to ref a game where it's more offensive oriented, and rightfully so. You know, they want it to be more entertaining. Even though an old coach likes a good grind-out win, the fan normally doesn't like a grind-out win, right? You like more scoring, and but I think it's continuing to grow. The thing that I talked about on a lot of the committees that I was on is why we can't allow international players that have signed professional contracts to still be able to come and play college basketball. Like that was something to me up until like 21 or 22 or whatever, they want to have a cutoff just to bring more talent and to bring more scoring, and plus that European flavor, because those guys, they can pass, they know how to play, they're well versed in the game. So we've always looked at that from an amateurism standpoint. Well, amateurism's gone, right? And so like hopefully they can keep looking at the big picture of that and make more people eligible internationally. That because a lot of those guys, they come from their clubs and they'll play some professional basketball at 16, 17, 18, and then if they don't quite advance to where they're an NBA player at that time, why can't they play college basketball? So like hopefully we can keep growing our game, you know, with our offense, but also keep growing our games with thoughts and in different ways to keep populating it with great players.
So you don't have a problem with, you know,
think Creighton has a guy, he's played professional for 4 years overseas, like getting paid. They're kind of weighing that right now.
No.
You don't have a problem with that at all?
No, not now. I don't. I would have before.
Matt, you mentioned just growing and developing a guy like Jacobson, and that's your philosophy. What kind of challenges are you expecting with having such a younger group this year,
Yeah.
and offsetting the loss of the veterans like Lance Jones?
Right. That's a great question, because the guys that are coming in to our roles that we need is either a backup from last year or a true freshman. So when you see that guy that's played a year or two for us and been in our program, or you're seeing somebody come in that just got here in June, that's a big difference. That's a big difference. And it kind of gets to their games, right, in terms of how we play and who we're playing. Sometimes we're going to need more quickness and ball handling. That leads to a true freshman. If we have more size and shooting ability on the wings, that leads to a guy that's been here, a guy like Will Berg and Brian Waddell. I've had guys that have been with us but haven't played, and now they could have an opportunity to be able to play right now. And so just trying to get them to understand within that role, when to attack, when not to attack, what we're looking for in plays and things like that. So it's definitely a process. And you'd be amazed sometimes by what guys pick up right away, and then what guys still don't know that's been with you for a while, right? You see that in organizations where guys are they're just all over everything, and you see other guys that are just kind of aloof, and things are going on all around them and they don't realize it. So it's no different as players. And so we do a lot of different things, and some people think it's odd. I don't want to, we're not here to say how much I know. We got to find out what they know. So giving them quizzes, always asking them questions, always doing things, because now it's so important that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing, the purpose of it. The old coach used to always harp on things and say, damn it, just do it. Do what I say. And we're opposite of that. We're this is why we're doing it. All right, we're doing it this way, but this is why we're doing it. Understand the why. And I'm not trying to convince them. I just want them to get the wheels moving so they understand the purpose of what we're trying to get done. Go ahead.
Just from the stylistics thing, how do you see the West Coast schools?
Yeah, I actually watched the Pac-12 schools more just because that's the last game at night before you go to bed, right? And so I've watched them. Well, we got 2 new coaches for those teams too, so you got to keep that in perspective. We played one last year in an exhibition game. So, all great coaches, right? And, all guys, knowing Mick from being at Cincinnati, knowing Dana from being at Southern Illinois when he was at Creighton. And there we played against Danny in the NCAA tournament. And then I mentioned playing against Arkansas last year in an exhibition. So I think they're different. So I don't think we're getting if you go back and look at the Pac-12, you'd be surprised at how many coaches in the Pac-12 are Midwestern guys. And so when Sean Miller was at Arizona, Nick, obviously, being at UCLA, Dana, being at Oregon, you can go on and on. And so the previous coach at Washington was a guy that was an assistant at Syracuse forever, right? So even though it's West Coast, you're thinking West Coast style, when you look at just the guy that was at UCLA that went, when Ben Holland went to 3, there he coached like a Midwestern guy, the way they played defense, the way they did stuff. So I think you kind of adjust and you morph into a style, when Indiana was dominating our league and Purdue was dominating the league, you morphed into Bobby Knight and Gene Caden, right? Because that's who was winning the league. The Big Ten championships at that time were going through the state of Indiana. It's just the way it was. Who do you copy? I know that. I've copied a lot from Tom Izzo. I've copied a lot from Bo Ryan. I don't go out and promote it because I don't want to see them get good players. But I do. I've stolen a lot from the people I've competed against. I think you can learn a lot from preparing for, say we're preparing against Michigan State and they play Michigan and they play Nebraska and they play. Let's see what they do against them. Does that make sense for us to do that? You'd be amazed at that. And Coach Katie would always talk about that because they used to have their travel partner, and obviously Indiana was their travel partner. And they would get so worked up at how we handle playing on a Thursday versus Michigan and then playing on a Saturday versus Michigan State or a Sunday versus Michigan State. And so they would worry about both of them. And then finally they just stopped it. They said, we're going to prepare for Thursday's game and Bob Knight's going to prepare for Sunday's game. And so whatever they decided to do on Thursday to beat Michigan, now when they went to Michigan State, they just waited for Indiana to play Michigan State and they just did what Bob Knight did. And it made it a lot easier. It made it a lot easier because now it's like getting into the NCAA tournament. Like, worry about I've always believed this. Worry about the first game. And that's coming from someone who's fallen on his face in the first game. Worry about the first game. Well, who's got the second game? Who's got this? I'm like, it doesn't matter. You lose, you don't play the second game. Like, just win the first game because they get to play a live game right in front of you, and in 48 hours they got to play another. They're not going to do anything different. They don't have the ability to do anything different. They can mix up a coverage, but they're not going to change their identity.
Hey, Matt, one more question. I asked Katie yesterday what it's like to be coaching at Purdue, that alma mater. She had so many nice things to say about you, Purdue. What's it like for you to kind of go into Mackey and think, man, I was here as a player, but now I'm coaching this place?
Yeah, it's surreal. There's no question about it to be that, because you never looked at it that way in coaching about like who was going to replace Gene Katie. Like, in your mind, you just thought he would always be the Purdue coach, right? And that's pretty cool. Purdue's a special place, and I feel fortunate. A lot of times, like when somebody calls you about a job and they start talking, like I start to talk about all the things that we have, and quickly the conversation ends because they don't have what we have. We've had 73 straight sellouts. We got the most Big Ten championships of any school in the Big Ten by 4 games, by four championships. We have the 11th most NCAA wins. I could go on and on about like what Purdue has and the fans and the education and that balance. So it's pretty cool. It puts things in perspective.
Pretty obvious question, but how do you replace 7'4", 300 pounds?
Yeah, you go out and get more guys. They're just not at that same stage. So like Daniel Jacobson and Raleigh Burgess and Will Berg and Trey Kaufman-Wren and Caleb First, like that's our front line. Like, we have a lot of weapons. There's a lot of people in this room that like to have our front line. So be thankful and grateful for what you have. Not, they had to adjust after Glenn Robinson left. We had to adjust after Carson Edwards. We had to, adjust after Caleb Swanigan. Like, those guys were all Americans too, and we kept going. So like, that's what you have to do. You just have to understand that none of them are Zach Edey. And like, don't try to make, like, no one's pulling up from 30 feet hitting threes like Carson Edwards was. Like, we still haven't done that again, but you just got to kind of morph into the strengths of your next team.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thank you.